Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. With Valentine's Day just around the corner, I thought we would take a look at the lovers and mistresses of King Henry VIII. This list will contain both confirmed, alleged and rumoured mistresses, but I will highlight during the video what category they fall into. Before we start, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure that notification bell is on so you don't miss the next instalment in this series. Starting in hopefully chronological order, we have Elizabeth Boleyn, Countess of Wiltshire, and the mother to Anne and Mary Boleyn.
What?
Elizabeth Boleyn, née Howard, was the mother of Anne Boleyn and Mary Boleyn, two women who played significant roles in the life of King Henry VIII. Born into the powerful Howard family, Elizabeth served potentially as a lady-in-waiting to Elizabeth of York, King Henry VIII's mother. We also think she may have been in the service of Catherine of Aragon, but again, it's not really that clear. The alleged affair between Elizabeth Boleyn and King Henry VIII remains a subject of historical controversy. Rumours suggested their liaison occurred around 1508, when Henry was 17 years old. However, these claims are largely discredited by modern historians due to lack of credible evidence and timeline inconsistencies. Several sources propagated this rumour, including John Hale, the Vicar of Isleworth, who in 1535 claimed that the King's Grace had meddled with the Queen's mother. Other notable figures who spread this allegation included Sir George Throckmorton, Elizabeth Armadas, and Thomas Jackson. The rumour gained traction among Catholic writers such as Nicholas Harpsfield, William Rastell, and Nicholas Sander, who used it to discredit Anne Boleyn and her daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. Adam Blackwood, a lawyer defending Mary Queen of Scots in 1587, also repeated this claim. However, King Henry VIII himself denied any sexual relationship with Elizabeth Boleyn. According to Sir George Throckmorton's account, when confronted about the rumour, Henry responded, "Never with the mother." This denial is significant, as Henry did admit to an affair with Mary Boleyn, but not with Elizabeth. Modern historians largely dismiss these rumours. Alison Weir points out that all the sources are hostile, and that the claims of Rastell and Sander don't align with historical facts, as Thomas Boleyn was not sent as ambassador to France until 1519. Furthermore, if we consider Anne Boleyn's birth year to be around 1501, Henry was probably less than 10 years old when Anne was conceived, making the allegations implausible. Eric Ives, a prominent Tudor historian, supports this view, stating, well, if we believe that Anne was born around 1501, then Henry was only 10 years old when the dalliance occurred, and somehow managed to escape his father's ever-watchful eye. It is much more likely that this was slanderous propaganda circulated by Boleyn enemies. Despite the lack of evidence for an affair, Elizabeth Boleyn played a crucial role in her daughter Anne's relationship with Henry VIII. In 1529, she accompanied her daughter Anne and the King, Henry VIII, to inspect York Place, as the King had declared it would be renamed Whitehall and renovated as a palace. Elizabeth Boleyn's life was marked by the dramatic rise and fall of her family's fortunes. She witnessed her daughter Anne's ascent to queenship and subsequent execution, events that would have undoubtedly caused her great joy and sorrow. Elizabeth Boleyn died in April 1538, having outlived both Anne and her son George, who were executed in 1536. While the alleged affair with King Henry VIII remains unsubstantiated, Elizabeth Boleyn's life illustrates the complex and often perilous natures of Tudor court politics, where rumour and innuendo could have far-reaching consequences for individuals and their families. The next woman on our list is often credited as Henry's first mistress. Elizabeth Denton, née Jerningham, was a prominent figure in the early life of King Henry VIII, serving as his governess and later as a caretaker for his children. Her alleged romantic involvement with the young Henry has been a subject of speculation among some historians, though evidence for such a relationship remains scant and largely circumstantial. Elizabeth's career at the Tudor court began during the reign of King Henry VII. She served as wardrobe keeper to Elizabeth of York, Henry VIII's mother, before being appointed in 1491 as Lady Governess to the infant Prince Henry. This position of trust indicates that Elizabeth was highly regarded for her capabilities and moral character. The suggestion that Elizabeth Denton might have been Henry VIII's first mistress stems primarily from the generous grants she received early in his reign. In 1509, upon Henry's ascension to the throne, Elizabeth was awarded an annuity of £50 a year, as well as the keepership during her lifetime of Coldharbour, Lady Margaret Beaufort's former London residence. In addition, there was a ton of Gascon wine delivered each year throughout her life. Some historians, such as Philippa Jones, have interpreted these gifts as evidence of a more intimate relationship between Elizabeth and the young king. Some have even gone as far to say that Henry's grandmother, Margaret Beaufort, hand-selected Elizabeth Denton to educate her grandson in such a manner.
Gross.
Which, in my opinion, is quite laughable. However, this speculation lacks substantial evidence. As Amy Licence observes, the suggestion rests wholly on the grants. Critics of this theory point out that Henry VIII made numerous generous grants to various courtiers at the start of his reign, aiming to appear more munificent than his father. For instance, we have Anne Oxenbridge, another nursery maid who received £20 a year for life in 1509. Elizabeth's career continued to flourish under King Henry VIII. In 1511, she was appointed to care for the short-lived Prince Henry, and in 1516, she was given charge of Princess Mary's nursery. These appointments further undermine the likelihood of an illicit relationship with the king, as it seems improbable that Henry would entrust the care of his children to a former mistress. It's important to note that Elizabeth was significantly older than Henry, so unlikely to be mistress material for a man who was known to like a younger woman. This age difference further cast doubt on the speculation of a romantic relationship. Throughout her life, Elizabeth maintained a respected position at court. She lived in the precinct of Blackfriars until her death in 1519. Her will, dated the 26th of April 1518, stipulated that she was to be buried near the stained glass window which featured St. Thomas Aquinas. Given the age gap, Elizabeth probably provided more of a maternal figure to Henry, a role that he had been missing since the death of his own mother in 1503, a death that deeply affected the young prince. The lack of concrete evidence for a romantic relationship between Elizabeth Denton and King Henry VIII, combined with her continued trusted position in the royal household, suggests that their connection was likely one of mutual respect rather than romantic involvement. Anne Hastings, née Stafford, Countess of Huntingdon, was a noblewoman of the Tudor court whose alleged affair with King Henry VIII in 1510 has been subject of historical debate and speculation. Born in around 1483, Anne was the youngest daughter of Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, and Catherine Woodville, sister of Elizabeth Woodville, Queen Consort to King Edward IV. This made Anne a member of one of the most prominent noble families in England. with strong ties to the Plantagenet dynasty. Anne was first married in 1503 to Sir Walter Herbert, an illegitimate son of William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke. The marriage was childless, and Sir Walter died in 1507. Following this, Anne married George Hastings in December 1509. George would later become the first Earl of Huntingdon in 1529. Together they had 8 children, 5 sons and 3 daughters. The rumoured affair between Anne and Henry VIII is said to have occurred in May 1510, less than a year after Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. At the time, Anne was around 27 years old, several years older than the young king, and served as a lady-in-waiting at court. According to Spanish ambassador Luis Carros, Henry discreetly pursued Anne while using Sir William Compton as a go-between to mask his interest. Carros reported that Compton had been soliciting Anne's favours on behalf of King Henry VIII, and that the affair caused considerable scandal at court. The situation escalated when Anne's sister, Elizabeth Stafford, Lady Fitzwalter, became suspicious of Compton's attentions towards Anne. Elizabeth informs their brother, Edward Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, and Anne's husband, George Hastings. Buckingham confronted Compton in Anne's lodgings at court and used many hard words against him. Compton immediately reported this confrontation to Henry VIII, who reacted with anger towards Buckingham.
Coincidence? I think not!
According to Carros, the king reprimanded the Duke angrily, which led Buckingham to leave court in a rage. In response to the scandal, George Hastings removed Anne from court and placed her in a convent approximately 60 miles away. This action effectively ended her involvement in court life for some time. While many accounts suggest that Anne was indeed Henry VIII's mistress for a brief period, historians remain divided due to the lack of concrete evidence. Some argue that the affair may have been exaggerated or even fabricated by contemporaries seeking to discredit Anne or her family. As historian Susan Higginbotham notes, "We don't know for sure that Henry had an affair with Anne Stafford, but we do know that it caused a huge scandal." Henry's anger over Buckingham's interference could indicate his personal involvement with Anne. However, it could also reflect irritation at Buckingham's presumption or frustration over the disruption caused by the scandal. Regardless of whether an affair occurred, the incident highlights the volatile nature of Tudor court politics. Despite this early scandal, Anne's marriage to George Hastings appears to have remained strong. Letters from George to Anne express affection and trust. She was named as one of his executors in his will. The couple primarily resided at Ashby de la Zouch in Leicestershire and Stoke in Buckinghamshire. In 1520, Anne attended the Field of Cloth of Gold alongside her husband. Anne became Countess of Huntingdon when George was elevated to an earldom in 1529. She later joined the household of Princess Mary, the future Queen Mary I, during the late 1530s. Anne died in 1544, and she was buried in Buckinghamshire. Her legacy remains tied to her family's prominence and her alleged entanglement with one of England's most infamous kings. Etiennette de la Baume was a Flemish noblewoman who had a brief but intriguing encounter with King Henry VIII in 1513. Born into the noble de la Baume family, she was the daughter of Marc de la Baume, Lord of Chateauvillain. In 1513, Etiennette served as a maid of honour in the Lille household of Margaret of Savoy, regent of the Netherlands. That same year, the young King Henry VIII, then 22 years old, stayed in Lille before the siege of Tournai during his military campaign in France. During his visit, Henry spent time with Margaret's court, impressing them with his skills in jousting, archery, dancing and music. It was here that he likely met Etiennette, who was among Margaret's maids of honour. Their encounter seems to have been brief but memorable. In a letter Etienne sent to Henry the following year, she reminded him that he had called her his page and spoke many pretty things to her. She also mentioned a promise Henry had made when they parted at Tournai, saying he would give her 10,000 crowns when she married.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
The nature of their relationship remains speculative, but the intimate tone of Etienne's letter suggests more than a casual acquaintance. She wrote to Henry seeking his assistance for her upcoming marriage, hinting at a level of intimacy between them. In August 1514, Etienne married Jean Neufchâtel, who was 62 years old at the time. Their marriage was childless, possibly due to the age difference. While Etienne's affair with Henry VIII was likely brief, it does provide a fascinating glimpse into the king's private life during his early reign. It suggests that even as a young married man, Henry was not adverse to flirtations or possibly more serious liaisons with women at court. Jane Poppincourt, or Jane Poppincourt, was a French woman who served at the Tudor court, first as a tutor to Henry VIII's sisters and later as a maid of honour. She came to England during the reign of King Henry VII, as she came to the English court and became a tutor for Henry VIII's two sisters, Mary and Margaret. In 1509, she was appointed as a lady-in-waiting to the new King Henry VIII's wife, Queen Catherine of Aragon. Jane's most notable relationship was with Louis d'Orléans, Duke de Longueville, a French nobleman captured during the Battle of Spurs in 1513. Despite his married status, he and Jane pursued a relationship while he was in England. As one source notes, during the Battle of Spurs in 1513, the king's troops captured a number of French nobles, notably Louis d'Orléans, Duke of Longueville, and they soon began a liaison. In late 1514, when preparations were being made for Princess Mary's marriage to King Louis XII of France, Jane's name was initially included on the list of attendants. However, Louis XII objected as he refused to allow such an immoral woman to return to his court and attend his new wife. There has been speculation about a possible brief affair between Jane Poppincourt and Henry VIII around 1514-1515-ish. As one source states, in 1514 there were rumours that Jane had become the king's mistress. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this claim, and if it occurred, it was likely brief and without deep passion. In 1516, Jane was allowed to return to France. Upon her departure, Henry VIII gave her a substantial gift of £100. While this gift had been interpreted by some as evidence of an amorous relationship, it could also be recognition of her 16 years of good service to Henry's mother, sister, and wife. Upon her return to France, it is believed that she reignited her affair with the Duke. Despite her open affair with a married man, she maintained a position of respect and influence for many years. Her eventual dismissal from court and subsequent return to France highlight the delicate balance between personal relationships and political considerations in the royal household. Elizabeth Bessie Blount was one of King Henry VIII's most significant and infamous mistresses, with their affair lasting approximately from 1514 to 1519. While her exact birth year is uncertain, Bessie was likely born between 1498 and 1502, making her just a teenager when the affair began. She was the daughter of Sir John Blount of Kinlet Hall, Shropshire, and his wife Catherine Peschel. Bessie's noble lineage and family connections positioned her well for a role at court. Bessie entered the royal court as a maid of honour to Queen Catherine of Aragon in 1512, likely through the influence of William Blount, Lord Mountjoy, who was Queen Catherine's chamberlain and a kinsman of Bessie's father. Known for her beauty and accomplishments, Bessie excelled in singing, dancing, and other goodly pastimes, which greatly appealed to King Henry VIII. Chroniclers described her as an exceptional beauty and talented. As historian Alison Weir notes, Bessie was said to be a woman of great charm and accomplishment. The affair between Henry and Bessie became public knowledge during the early years of his reign. Although specific details are scarce, their relationship is believed to have begun in around 1514. According to some accounts, Bessie featured prominently in court entertainments and pageants during this time, which may have drawn attention to her relationship with the king. The affair reached its climax in 1519, when Bessie gave birth to Henry's illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, on the 15th of June at Blackmore Priory in Essex. Fitzroy was Henry VIII's only acknowledged illegitimate child. The king openly celebrated the birth of this healthy son, naming him Fitzroy, meaning son of the king.
Breathtaking. I shall call him Mini-Me.
The public acknowledgement was significant, as it demonstrated Henry's ability to father male heirs during a time when his marriage to Catherine of Aragon had failed to produce a surviving son. After Fitzroy's birth, Henry arranged an honourable marriage for Bessie to Gilbert Talboys, one of Cardinal Wolsey's wards. The marriage took place in late 1519 or early 1520. The couple had several children together before Gilbert's death in 1530. Following his death, Bessie remarried to Edward Fiennes de Clinton, later the 9th Baron Clinton. Throughout her life, Bessie continued to receive royal favour. She was granted land and other gifts by Henry VIII, even after their romantic relationship had ended. However, there is no evidence that their sexual relationship continued after Fitzroy's birth. Bessie's affair with Henry VIII is significant not only for its duration, but also because it produced Henry's only acknowledged illegitimate child. This fact became crucial during Henry's later marital troubles and his quest for a male heir. Historian Susanna Lipscomb observes that Fitzroy's existence proved that Henry could father a healthy son, which added pressure on Catherine of Aragon and later Anne Boleyn to deliver a male heir. Bessie Blount lived until 1540 or 1541 and died at an unknown location. Her legacy endures as one of the most prominent mistresses of King Henry VIII and as the mother of his only publicly recognised illegitimate child. Jane Pollard was a noblewoman from Devon, England, born in around 1500. She was the daughter of Sir Lewis Pollard, a judge of the Common Pleas, and Anne, or sometimes known as Agnes, Hex. In 1520, Jane married Sir Hugh Stukeley, a Knight of the Body to King Henry VIII. Jane and Hugh had a large family, with sources suggesting they had between 10 and 12 children. Their third son, Thomas Stukeley, born in around 1525, would later become a source of controversy and speculation regarding Jane's relationship with King Henry VIII. Thomas led a colourful and adventurous life, becoming known as a soldier, pirate, and adventurer.
You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
His exploits brought him fame and notoriety throughout Europe. As historian Evelyn Waugh describes him, Thomas was a preposterous and richly comic figure in the Elizabethan age. The rumour that Thomas Stukeley was Henry VIII's illegitimate son began circulating later in Thomas's life. This claim, if true, would suggest that Jane Pollard had an affair with the king. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this assertion. The theory of Thomas's royal parentage seems to rest on a single report by James Fitzgerald, an Irish exile who met Thomas in Rome in 1577 to 1578. Fitzgerald wrote that some said Thomas was an illegitimate son of King Henry VIII. However, the credibility of this claim is questionable, as Fitzgerald's sources are unknown. Historians generally dismiss the idea of Thomas being Henry VIII's son. As Alison Weir puts in her book about Mary Boleyn, the Great and Infamous Whore, Henry VIII never set foot in Devon and only once travelled as far as the West Country in 1535. This makes a liaison between the king and Jane Pollard extremely unlikely. Furthermore, William Cecil Lord Burleigh, Queen Elizabeth's chief minister, spoke harshly of Thomas after his death, calling him a defamed person almost through all Christendom. Such language would be unlikely if Cecil believed Thomas to be the Queen's half-brother. While Jane Pollard's life was certainly interesting due to her connection to the Tudor court through her husband and her son's notorious exploits, there is no substantial evidence to suggest she ever had an affair with King Henry VIII. The rumours surrounding her son Thomas appear to be more a product of his own colourful life and the political intrigue of the time rather than any connection to royal parentage. Elizabeth Carew was a prominent figure in the Tudor court during the reign of King Henry VIII. She was born in around 1500 and she was the daughter of Sir Thomas Bryan and Lady Margaret Bryan, both of whom held influential positions in the royal household. Elizabeth's connections to the court were further strengthened by her marriage to Sir Nicholas Carew, a close friend of King Henry VIII. In October 1514, a letter from Charles Brandon to King Henry VIII hinted at the king's familiarity with both Elizabeth Carew and Bessie Blount. Brandon asks Henry to remind Mistress Blount and Mistress Carew that next time I write unto them letters or send them tokens. This suggests that both women were engaged in flirtatious relationships with the king, and possibly Brandon as well. Elizabeth's alleged affair with King Henry VIII is believed to have begun around this time. The king showered her with extravagant gifts, including many beautiful diamonds and pearls and innumerable jewels. Such lavish presents were often seen as evidence of a more intimate relationship between the king and his courtiers. Interestingly, it appears that Henry VIII may have been content to share Elizabeth's affections with other men at court. Sources suggest that he was happy to share the favours of Elizabeth Carew and Elizabeth Blount with men such as William Compton. This arrangement, while unusual by modern standards, was not uncommon in the Tudor court. Elizabeth's position at court remained secure for many years, even as Henry's affections shifted. She continued to receive royal favours and gifts as late as 1529. However, her fortunes took a dramatic turn in 1539 when her husband, Sir Nicholas Carew, was executed for treason. Despite the scandal surrounding her alleged affair with the king and her husband's execution, Elizabeth Carew managed to maintain some status at court. She died in July 1546, leaving behind a complex legacy as a possible royal mistress and a survivor of Tudor court intrigues. Mary Boleyn was born around 1499, and she was the elder sister of Anne Boleyn and a notable figure in the Tudor court. Her life took a dramatic turn when she became the mistress of King Henry VIII in the early 1520s. Mary's affair with Henry VIII likely began shortly after her marriage to William Carey on the 4th of February 1520. The king himself attended their wedding. Their liaison is believed to have started in around 1522. The exact duration of Mary's relationship with the king remains uncertain, but it's thought to have lasted several years. During this time, Mary gave birth to 2 children, Catherine in 1524 and Henry in 1526. While speculation persists about their paternity, Henry VIII never acknowledged them as his, and some historians even argue that their relationship was over by 1524, meaning that Henry Carey could not have been Henry's. Evidence of the affair includes Henry VIII naming a ship the Mary Boleyn,
Pretty obvious.
and granting favours to William Carey. However, these grants were not unusual for courtiers, and may not necessarily indicate payment for access to Mary. The relationship likely ended by 1526, although some speculate 1524, as Henry's attention shifted to Mary's sister, Anne.
I'm not saying I wasn't a little surprised.
The affair later created a legal complication when Henry sought to marry Anne, as it placed him within the same degree of affinity to both sisters. Mary's life after the affair was marked by both tragedy and scandal. She was widowed in 1528 when William Carey died of the sweating sickness. In 1534, she secretly married William Stafford, a match deemed unsuitable by her family and the royal court, leading to her banishment. Joan Dingley was a royal laundress who allegedly caught the eye of King Henry VIII during the late 1520s. Raised within the royal household, Joan worked as a laundress, washing the clothes of King Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. Her low social status might have made her an easy target for the king's wandering eye. Historians suggest the affair was likely a brief encounter, possibly a one-night stand, where Henry took advantage of her vulnerable position. The most compelling evidence of their alleged relationship is the birth of her daughter, Etheldreda, or Audrey Malt, in the late 1520s. Interestingly, Henry seems to take an unusual interest in the child's fate. He granted generous lands and properties to John Malt, the royal tailor, and claimed Etheldreda as his own daughter, as in John claimed Etheldreda, not Henry. After Etheldreda's birth, Henry quickly arranged for Joan to marry a man named Dobson, effectively removing her from potential court scandal. However, the story doesn't end there. Etheldreda went on to serve in the household of Princess Elizabeth Tudor during Queen Mary's reign, a placement that some historians believe suggests royal recognition of her parentage. The most intriguing twist: Etheldreda remained close to Elizabeth and died just months after her alleged half-sister was crowned queen in 1559. While we may never know the full truth of Joan Dingley's relationship with Henry VIII, her story provides a fascinating glimpse into the complex and often hidden world of Tudor relationships. First on our list is Mary Berkeley. Mary Berkeley was born in and around 1510, and she's primarily remembered for her alleged affair with King Henry VIII. As the daughter of a James Berkeley of Thornbury and Susan Fitzallen, Mary was well connected in the West Country and Wales. Her life was marked by marriages and motherhood, but it is the rumours surrounding her relationship with King Henry VIII that has captured historical interest. Mary was raised in a prominent family and became a ward of her uncle Maurice, Lord Berkeley. In 1526, she married Thomas Perrott, a union arranged by her uncle. The couple settled in Pembrokeshire and had 3 children: John, Jane, and Elizabeth. John Perrott, born in November 1528, would later become the centre of speculation regarding his parentage. After Thomas Perrott's death in 1531, Mary remarried twice more, ultimately passing away in 1586. Despite her multiple marriages and children, it is the whispers of her past that linger in historical narratives. The rumours of Mary's affair with King Henry VIII began to circulate in around 1527, when Henry was seeking an annulment from his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Some historians suggest that Mary may have been part of Catherine's household. However, there is no contemporary evidence to support this claim. The most significant aspect of the speculation revolves around John Perrott's resemblance to Henry VIII. It was said that John bore a striking likeness to the king, leading to claims that he might be Henry's illegitimate son. As noted by historian J.P. Davis, the actual legend is that Mary Berkeley, Perrott, had an affair with Henry VIII. However, that legend has been shown to be untrue. While some modern writers assert that Mary served as a lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon, there is no substantial evidence to confirm this role. The only visit Henry made to the western parts of England occurred in 1535, when John was already 7 years old. This timeline raises questions about the feasibility of an affair during the period when Mary purportedly was involved with the king. Historian Alison Weir notes that during this time, Henry may have sought solace elsewhere, suggesting that if there were any truth to the rumours, they may have occurred amid his marital strife. Despite the lack of concrete evidence supporting the claims of the affair with Henry VIII, the legend persists largely due to John's later prominence. He became Sir John Perrott and eventually served as Lord Deputy of Ireland. His life was filled with scandal and intrigue. However, all his children were born after Henry VIII's death in January 1547. Mary Berkeley's story remains a fascinating example of how speculation can shape historical narratives. While she lived a life marked by marriage and motherhood in the West Country, it is the alleged connections to one of England's most notorious kings that continue to draw interest from historians and enthusiasts alike. While Mary Berkeley's life intertwined with significant historical figures and events, her alleged affair with Henry VIII remains unproven. Her legacy endures not as a mistress, but as a subject of intrigue. It's also incredibly unlikely that Henry would have had an affair with Mary Berkeley, as at that time in history when they were supposed to have had the alleged affair, he was chasing none other than Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, is one of history's most intriguing figures. Her life was characterised by ambition, romance, and tragedy, ultimately reshaping the course of English history. But she was also one of Henry's mistresses. It is thought that Anne was born in around 1501 or 1507 at Blickling Hall in Norfolk. Anne was the daughter of Sir Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard. The Boleyn family was well connected. Her father was a respected diplomat who was knighted at King Henry VIII's coronation. Anne received an exceptional education, which was unusual for women of her status at the time. She spent her formative years in the courts of Europe, first in the Netherlands and then in France, where she served as an attendant to Queen Claude. Eric Ives notes that she was a remarkable, intelligent, quick-witted young noblewoman who was well versed in many aspects of European politics. Anne caught the eye of King Henry VIII in around 1526. Unlike her sister Mary, who had been his mistress, Anne refused to become involved without the promise of marriage. This defiance only intensified Henry's desire for her. His determination to marry Anne led him to break away from the Roman Catholic Church, declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England. They likely married in secret in late 1532, with an official ceremony taking place on the 25th of January 1533. Anne was crowned Queen Consort on the 1st of June 1533. Their marriage produced one daughter, Elizabeth, born on the 7th of September 1533. However, Anne's failure to provide a male heir strained their relationship. By early 1536, after suffering a miscarriage of a male child, Henry's affections began to shift towards Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting. The turning point came when Anne was arrested on the 2nd of May 1536 on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, allegations widely regarded as fabricated by her political enemies. Despite a lack of credible evidence against her during a highly politicised trial, she was found guilty on the 15th of May. In her final address before her execution, she stated, I am come hither to accuse no man, but I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you. On the 19th of May, 1536, Anne was executed at the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn's tragic end marked not just the fall of a queen, but also a significant moment in English history. Her marriage prompted Henry VIII to break from the Roman Catholic Church and led to profound changes in religious and political structures in England. As Alison Weir describes in her work, Anne Boleyn had the gift of arousing strong feelings. People were never neutral. They either loved her or loathed her. She is perhaps best remembered as the mother of Queen Elizabeth I, who would go on to become one of England's greatest monarchs. Even centuries later, Anne Boleyn continues to captivate historians and the public alike. Her story is one of resilience against court politics and ambition that changed the course of history. Elizabeth Armadas was known for her bold claims and controversial prophecies about King Henry VIII. Born Elizabeth Bryce, she was the wife of Robert Armadas, a wealthy royal goldsmith, and became infamous for her dramatic accusations in 1533. According to historical records, Elizabeth claimed to have had an affair with Henry VIII before his marriage to Anne Boleyn. She specifically stated that she had met the king at the house of Sir William Compton in Thames Street prior to Compton's death in 1528. In 1533, Elizabeth made a series of shocking public declarations. She denounced Anne Boleyn as a harlot and predicted her execution. More provocatively, she alleged that Henry VIII had kept both the mother and the daughter, suggesting an inappropriate relationship between the king and the Boleyn women. Her prophecies were not limited to royal scandals either. Elizabeth claimed to possess a painted roll of predictions involving battles, deaths, and even the conquest of Scotland. While most of her prophecies were considered fantastical, her statements about the royal court were taken seriously enough to lead to her arrest for treason. Historian Josephine Wilkinson suggests Elizabeth's claims might have been motivated by personal grievances. After being abandoned by her husband, she began championing the causes of discarded women like Catherine of Aragon, which fueled her animosity towards Anne Boleyn. While the truth of her alleged affair with Henry VIII remains unproven, Elizabeth Armadas represents the complex and often dangerous world of Tudor court politics, where a woman's reputation could be both a weapon and a vulnerability. Mary Shelton, often referred to as Madge, was a complex figure in the Tudor court whose life epitomised the intricate social and political dynamics of Henry VIII's reign. Okay, so for the next bit, I've had to write it down because it gets a little bit confusing. So there's some confusing with regards to Margaret or Madge Shelton, and it's often believed that Madge/Margaret had a sister called Mary. A lot of this is down to, obviously, the fact that English wasn't standardised and that there was some writings where it was with a G and some with a Y. Anyway, this gets really complicated. Some people think they're two separate people and that Mary and Madge were sisters, while others actually now think that Mary, Madge and Margaret were all one person. Just for the sake of simplicity, I'm actually going to wrap Mary, Margaret, Madge into one person, just because a lot of the research you do for one normally drips over into the other. I'm not saying that I necessarily believe that they are one person. Just for this, it's a lot easier, okay, and we're just gonna go with it. So I do apologise on this section if any of the information I give about Margaret is actually about Mary and vice versa. We don't know Margaret's birth year, but we do know that it's somewhere between 1501 and 1520, which is when her mother had her last child, Thomas. She was the daughter of Sir John Shelton and a first cousin to Anne Boleyn, positioning her at the heart of court. As a lady-in-waiting to Anne Boleyn, Mary was more than a passive observer of royal politics. Historian Ellie Webster describes her as a social climber with a spirited nature, who used her intellectual capabilities to navigate court life. Her contributions to the Devonshire manuscript revealed her as a talented poet and a translator, with works that often critiqued societal double standards of the time. The affair with Henry VIII began in February 1535. As Alison Weir notes in her book The Six Wives of King Henry VIII, Anne had suggested her cousin Madge, hoping that Madge could use her influence to get Henry to be nicer to her. This strategic move was deeply calculated. As one historian observes, for a Tudor queen, it was expected that their husbands would pursue a mistress. It had been a common reoccurrence for both Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. Eustace Chapuis, the imperial ambassador, documented the relationship, referring to Mary as Mistress Shelton. The affair was complicated by Mary's existing engagement to Henry Norris, one of the king's closest advisors, which added another layer of political complexity to her situation. In the family history book, there is a note by her name which says Madge was attendant at the court of her cousin, Queen Anne Boleyn, and was instructed by her to distract the attention of King Henry VIII when he was making love to Jane Seymour. To add another layer of complexity, we know that Anne taunted Henry Norris, Madge's fiancé, because he was taking a while to get married to Madge. Potentially, because of the Boleyns' weakening position at court, Henry Norris may not have been as eager to marry into the Boleyn family, as he allegedly said, "I would tarry a while longer." Now, no one knows why Anne responded the way that she did, but Anne then thought about flirting with him and basically said that you look for dead men's shoes, if aught came to the king, but good you would look to have me. Immediately after, she sent Norris to her almoner to swear she was a good woman. So Anne obviously felt guilty about saying that, which means she knew she shouldn't have said that, because she was basically saying, if the king was dead, you would marry me, which is why you're waiting and you're not marrying my cousin Madge. And this is why I just love the Tudors, because they're just in and out of each other's pockets. They're so incestuous, it's great. It's like watching EastEnders, but with like royalty. The liaison lasted approximately 6 months, ending in around August 1535. Historian Amy Licence provides crucial context, noting that mistresses were far more than mere romantic interests of the monarch, but pivotal figures who navigated the intricacies of power, politics, and societal expectations. There remains some historical uncertainty about the affair, as one source notes, one lingering question about Madge's life is whether it was truly her or her sister Margaret who was romantically involved with Henry VIII. This confusion highlights the intricate nature of Tudor court documentation. Unlike other royal mistresses, Mary did not press for significant lands or titles. After the affair ended, she remained at court, her position largely unchanged. As Kelly Hart suggests, the briefness of the affair may account for why the king eventually returned to Anne. The relationship ultimately did not improve Anne Boleyn's situation. Alison Weir notes that Anne became increasingly jealous, and the affair did nothing to secure her position at court. This period marks the beginning of Anne's downfall, which would culminate in her execution less than a year later. As historian Ellie Webster concludes, Mary Shelton was not just a footnote in Henry VIII's romantic history, but a remarkable woman who understood the delicate art of court survival. The next mistress on our list is another one of Henry's wives, Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour became his third wife and the mother of his long-desired male heir. Born in 1509, roughly, to Sir John Seymour and Marjorie Wentworth, Jane was more than just another royal consort. She was a strategic and influential partner who fundamentally altered Henry's personal and political landscape. Jane's journey began, potentially, as a lady-in-waiting, first to Catherine of Aragon, and then definitely to Anne Boleyn. Her royal connections were significant. She was a fifth cousin to Henry and came from a prominent gentry family with royal lineage. She was also a cousin to Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. Unlike her predecessors, Jane presented herself as gentle and reserved, a stark contrast to Anne Boleyn's assertive personality. Henry's attraction to Jane began in around 1535 during a visit to her family's Wolf Hall. What distinguished Jane was her unwillingness to become merely a mistress. As historian Alison Weir notes, she was a person of some principle who had the courage to stand up for the things she really cared about. Their relationship unfolded dramatically. 11 days after Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry married Jane in a private ceremony at Whitehall Palace.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
On the 30th of May, 1536. The speed of their union shocked many courtiers, with some noting the unusual transition from one queen's execution to another's coronation. Quite rightly so. Jane was not a passive royal wife. She successfully reconciled Henry with his daughter Mary, helping restore Mary to the royal succession. She also attempted to intercede on behalf of the monasteries, though Henry brutally rebuffed her, warning her about meddling in politics. Remember what happened to your predecessor? On the 12th of October 1537, Jane gave Henry his most desired gift, a male heir, Prince Edward. Tragically, she died just 12 days later from postnatal complications. Henry's grief was profound. The Duke of Norfolk described the king as in great heaviness, and Henry reportedly shut himself away at Windsor, refusing to see anyone. Henry considered Jane his most beloved wife. When he died, he chose to be buried beside her, a testament to her unique place in his heart. She was the only wife to provide him a male heir and to be buried alongside him, cementing her historical significance. As Alison Weir summarises, Jane was a gentle influence who offered Henry some calm during a tumultuous period of his life. Her short but impactful reign transformed the Tudor dynasty and Henry's personal world. Anne Bassett emerged as a fascinating figure in the tumultuous court of King Henry VIII, navigating the complex political and romantic landscape with remarkable resilience. Born in 1520, she was the daughter of Sir John Bassett and Honor Grenville, with a unique family connection to the royal court through her stepfather, Arthur Plantagenet, an illegitimate son of King Edward IV. Anne's journey to court was carefully orchestrated by her ambitious mother. In 1537, she was sworn into Jane Seymour's service, a moment of triumph after years of her mother's persistent efforts. Tragically, her appointment lasted barely a month, as Jane Seymour died shortly after giving birth to Prince Edward. Speculation surrounded Anne's relationship with Henry VIII during 1538 to 1539. Ambassadors and court gossip suggested she might become the king's mistress, or even his wife. Henry's gift of a horse and saddle to the then 17-year-old Anne fueled these rumours. As one historical source notes, she was a pretty creature with wit enough to potentially catch the king's eye. Anne's court career was marked by strategic survival. When Anne of Cleves arrived, she initially lost her position due to an excess of ladies-in-waiting. However, through her mother's connections, she eventually secured a position serving the fourth queen. Her illness in 1539, which saw her recuperating at her cousin Sir Anthony Denny's home, at the King's Grace's commandment, added further intrigue to her relationship with Henry. Despite the speculation, Anne never became Henry's wife or confirmed mistress. She remained at court throughout Henry's reign, surviving even when her stepfather fell under suspicion of treason. In 1553, she became a lady-in-waiting to Queen Mary I, and she married Sir Walter Hungerford in 1554. Robert Hutchinson's assessment captures her essence. A woman who managed to avoid the dangerous fate of many of Henry's romantic interests while maintaining her position at court. As he wearily noted, one must admire the girl if she managed to avoid marrying Henry, given his track record. Anne Bassett died sometime before 1558, leaving behind a legacy of survival in one of history's most treacherous royal courts. So far, I have tried to keep this list in chronological order. However, I may have made a slight faux pas with this one.
Big Blunt sack of drama say what?
I know. So obviously I've placed it after Anne Bassett, but in reality, if this affair with the Mistress Parker did take place, it would likely be before Mary Boleyn. So apologies on that front. The story of Arabella Parker as a mistress of King Henry VIII is one shrouded in mystery and speculation. While some accounts suggest she may have had a fleeting romance with the Tudor king, the historical evidence remains tenuous at best. The identity of Mistress Parker, often mentioned in relation to King Henry VIII, is uncertain, and several theories exist regarding who she may have been. There is little concrete evidence to support the existence of Arabella Parker as one of Henry VIII's mistresses. For starters, the name Arabella was very uncommon in Tudor England, and no contemporary records substantiate her involvement with the king. The most notable Arabella, of course, is Lady Arabella Stuart, but she doesn't come onto the scene until the reign of Henry's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. The first mention of an Arabella Parker as Henry's mistress surfaced in the late 19th century, centuries after the events in question. This lack of reliable historical documentation raises doubts about her existence. However, there are some theories on who she might have been. Kelly Hart suggests that this was Arabella Parker, a merchant's wife, or Marjorie Parker, a member of the Princess Mary's household. The name Mistress Parker has led to speculation about several possible historical figures. As we said earlier, Marjorie Parker was a member of Princess Mary's or the Lady Mary's household, so she is considered a plausible candidate due to her proximity to the royal family. However, another theory is that she was Jane Boleyn, née Parker, Parker being her maiden name, the Lady Rochford, the wife of George Boleyn, and a lady-in-waiting at court. She, of course, participated in the Chateau Vert in 1522 alongside Anne Boleyn, where she may have potentially caught the king's attention. We also have Alice Parker, the mother of Jane Parker, though little evidence links her to King Henry VIII. Philippa Jones also seems to lean towards it being Marjorie Parker due to her being in Mary's household and hence ease of access. However, this is no more of a slam dunk than the Jane Boleyn theory, as she was also easily accessible, having been in Anne Boleyn's household and also participating in Chateau Vert in 1522 as Jane Parker, not Jane Boleyn. The notion of Arabella Parker as Henry VIII's mistress appears to be a later historical invention rather than a fact-based account. While a Mistress Parker may have existed, her identity remains unknown. Without contemporary evidence, Arabella Parker's alleged affair with Henry VIII is more legend than history, leaving historians to continue unravelling the truth behind Tudor mystery. Catherine Howard was the fifth wife of King Henry VIII and remains one of the most tragic figures in Tudor history. As a cousin to Anne Boleyn and a member of the powerful Howard family, Catherine's rise to prominence was swift but ultimately doomed. Catherine was born into a family with significant connections. She was the daughter of Lord Edmund Howard and Joyce Culpeper. Her upbringing was marked by relative poverty, but her lineage provided her with opportunities at court. Catherine first entered royal service as a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves, where she caught the eye of King Henry VIII. Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves had been politically motivated and quickly annulled in July 1540. Just weeks later, on the 28th of July, Catherine Howard married Henry VIII in a private ceremony at Oatlands Palace. Their union was characterised by Henry's infatuation with Catherine, who was approximately 16 or 17 years old, we don't know when she was born, while he was 49. Historian Josephine Wilkinson describes this as a truly spectacular rise from obscurity to the seat of power. For the first year of their marriage, Catherine appeared to be a devoted wife. She enjoyed lavish gifts and attention from the king, who reportedly spent more on her than any of his previous wives. However, beneath this facade laid a troubled past that would soon unravel. Catherine's past relationships came back to haunt her. Before marrying Henry, she had been involved with several men, including Francis Derham, who had referred to her as his wife.
It's not going to go well. It just isn't. It's going to be an accident. We just don't know what sort of accident.
In late 1541, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer learned of Catherine's indiscretions and brought them to Henry's attention. Initially incredulous, Henry became furious upon confirming the allegations. On the 11th of February 1542, Parliament passed a bill declaring it treason for an unchaste woman to marry the king. Slightly unfair, seeing as that wasn't the law prior, just an expectation. Catherine's world collapsed when she was arrested on charges of adultery and treason. Following a swift investigation that revealed her past relationships and ongoing affair with Culpeper, she was found guilty. On the 13th of February 1542, Catherine Howard was executed by beheading at the Tower of London. Her tragic fate has led historians to debate whether she should be viewed as a victim or as a vixen. As historian Anna Whitlock states, Catherine's biggest mistake was continuing her affair with Thomas Culpeper after she had married Henry VIII. Many see Catherine as a young woman who was caught in the dangerous political machinations of the Tudor court. Catherine Howard's life serves as a cautionary tale about ambition and desire in a world where personal relationships could lead to devastating consequences. Her story is often overshadowed by those of her predecessors, but remains essential for understanding the complexities of Henry VIII's reign. Catherine Willoughby, born on the 22nd of March 1519, was a remarkable noblewoman who navigated the complex political and religious landscape of Tudor England with extraordinary skill and courage. Born to William Willoughby, 11th Baron Willoughby de Eresby, and Maria de Salinas, she was the sole heir to her father's extensive estates, making her one of the most significant and affluent heiresses of her generation. At just 7 years old, Catherine inherited her father's barony and became a prime marriage prospect. In 1534, she married Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, who was 35 years her senior. Despite the significant age difference, the marriage was politically and financially advantageous. Her close connection to the royal court placed her in a unique position of proximity to King Henry VIII. After Charles Brandon's death in 1545, court rumours intensified about Catherine potentially becoming Henry's seventh wife. She was young, so 26, wealthy, and had already borne 2 sons, qualities that would have appealed to the ageing king, desperate for a male heir. Well, male spare. While historians emphasise that there is no concrete evidence of a romantic affair, her proximity to Henry fuelled persistent speculation. Catherine's life was marked by a passionate embrace of Protestantism. She transitioned from Catholicism with remarkable ease, developing strong convictions about religious reform. Her friendship with Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's sixth wife, further solidified her Protestant beliefs. She became an active supporter of the Reformation, using her wealth and influence to support Protestant publishers and reformers. When Mary I ascended to the throne and began persecuting Protestants, Catherine's faith was severely tested. In 1554, she and her second husband, Richard Bertie, fled England with their children to escape religious persecution. They sought refuge in Europe and embodies the courage of Protestant nobles during this tumultuous period. By 1546, Henry was severely ill and practically immobile. While he might have considered Catherine as a potential wife earlier, most historians believe these were merely speculative thoughts rather than serious intentions. Catherine ultimately escaped becoming Henry's wife, marrying Richard Bertie and surviving to continue her significant work. After Mary I's death, Catherine returned to England. Though she did not serve Elizabeth I directly, she continued to promote religious reform from her estates in Lincolnshire. She founded a grammar school in Spilsby and remained an influential Protestant advocate until her death on the 19th of September 1580. As historian Tony Richards notes, Catherine was a woman far ahead of her time, prepared to stand up for her beliefs, whose legacy continues to inspire those who study this complex period of English history. Her life demonstrates how personal conviction could challenge the most powerful political and religious systems of the time. And that's where I'm going to leave today's video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you really like this video, then why not give a super thanks? But until the next one, guys, have a wonderful day. Bye.